Hello, World Lit people. It is I again, your absent teacher. I hope you're all doing well. I miss seeing ya. I really do. I'd much rather be with you than with my continuous motion machine. Anyway, this will be the fourth lecture of the 10 I'm going to do for my absence, and our lecture today concerns a woman, a French woman, born in 1492, and she died in 1549. 1492 to 1549. Her name is Marguerite, M-A-R-G-U-E-R-I-T-E. De Navarre, D-E for the preposition. And her title is Navarre, N-A-V-A-R-R-E. N-A-V-A-R-R-E. She was a member of the French royal family. Her brother Francis became the King of France in 1515. Her brother became King of France in 1515. So since he was her only brother, her only sibling, and since they were brother and sister and in line for the royal throne of France, oh my gosh, how important is that? They received a very fine education. They were indulged children, and they were devoted to one another. Kind of reminds me of my own brother. Very much devoted to one another. They were always together, they trusted one another, they were confidants one for the other, they played together, they grew up together, they just had a really fine relationship. Well, she wed a man, Charles, who was a duke. You don't need to know what he was a duke of, big deal. He was a duke, so she became a duchess, Duchess Marguerite, in 1509. So she's just 17 years old when she marries for the first time. It was an arranged marriage, and she went to where this duke was from, Englsih, to live with him. Of course, a woman goes to live with her husband. Well, that marriage of them living together only lasted about 6 years, because in 1515, her brother Francis became the King of France. And Francis wanted Marguerite at his side. He trusted her. She was a smart woman. She was articulate. She was decisive. And he relied on her to help him make royal decisions. And so she went to Paris and joined him to kind of help rule the country of France at the time. And so her marriage to Charles Duke, or Duke Charles, just didn't last very long because she eventually did leave him to go be with her brother. And they were a perfect team, she and her brother Francis. They even led the French army together. She would go to the field and be with her brother while he was in action on the battlefield. So she was a brave woman. She loved her brother, and she loved France. Okay? When France fought Spain in about the 1520s, Spain captured Francis, captured the King of France, and held him for ransom. Okay? That was a very typical way of doing battle. You didn't necessarily kill people, but you took them for ransom so you could make some money on the exchange. If you killed an important person, you're not going to get anything out of it. But if you could ransom them, your side would make a little bit of money. So anyway, and she was appalled that Spain would capture her brother. And Spain actually moved, the army of Spain actually moved to Paris to take down the French government, to take down the royal family there. Well, when Marguerite got word that Spain was marching on Paris to take it over, she said, "Over my dead body, people." And so she led French troops in battle to defeat the Spanish, who wanted to take over France. She won. Okay? After she secured the security of Paris, she traveled to Spain. This is in wartime. And here's a woman traveling alone. Well, she's got her retinue with her, but, you know, how odd for a woman in 1523 to go gallivanting around in a carriage in wild war times, for crying out loud. So she gets to Spain, and she secures the release of her brother. She negotiates a release. She ain't paying for him. She's getting him back. She's going to save as much money as she can for France. So she secures her brother's release. What a chick. You know, that takes a lot of courage to do that. It really, really does. In 1525, Duke Charles dies. Okay? Even though they've lived apart these years, they were still married. Well, he dies, the first husband dies in 1525. And 2 years later, 1527, she marries a man that she loved. Remember, her marriage to Charles was a put-up deal, was an arranged marriage. So she marries a guy named Henry Albert. Henry Albert. And he is king of a little section of what used to be France, Navarre. So that's how come she becomes Marguerite de Navarre. She was the queen of Navarre. And as she was the ruler's wife of Navarre, she was a tireless worker on behalf of her people. She established orphanages. She established hospitals. She supported artists. She commissioned artwork for the King of France, her brother, and for her own husband, King of Navarre. She helped reform convents, monasteries. She was very involved with her people. Very commendable. She spent money to help her people. She understood both Catholicism and Protestantism. And usually French people were either you're all Protestant or you're all Catholic and never the twain shall meet. Very, very prejudiced against one or the other depending on what religion you were. But she supported both Catholics and Protestants. So she's kind of a healer of sorts, a very admirable person. And through all of these activities that she had, she found time to write. She wrote plays. She wrote histories. She wrote poetry. And she wrote kind of vignettes, little short stories. Okay? Short story isn't invented until 1842, but she's kind of cooking, trying to do something different, you know? It's kind of cool. One of the titles for which she is best known is the Heptameron. And Heptameron is spelled H-E-P-T-A-M-E-R-O-N. H-E-P-T-A-M-E-R-O-N. Heptameron. And this is a book, kind of a collection of these little short stories, these little vignettes. It's a collection of 70 stories. It was supposed to be 100 stories. She wanted to write something like the Heptameron. Remember that? Boccaccio? And so she's kind of copying Boccaccio's lead on this writing. And she only wrote 70 chapters, and then she died. She didn't finish the work, but it was still published after her death. The theme of the Heptameron is the struggle between the genders. Struggle between men and women, female and male. Who is supposed to be the superior person? Who's supposed to be the leader? Who's supposed to kowtow to whom? Who's supposed to make the directions? And she says that women are just as important as men are. Okay? And look what she's done. Why wouldn't she have that idea or that opinion? Of course. I mean, she ruled France kind of all by herself, you know? Saved France. So she finds that she's kind of an early purveyor of women's liberation. She kind of copies the notion of the Decameron in other ways as well, besides just the different stories. She has speakers in the Heptameron. There are 5 male characters, and there are 5 female characters who tell these stories. Okay? And the stories are pretty bawdy, B-A-W-D-Y, kind of sexy, you know, kind of alluring. She talks about struggles between men and women, sexual issues like rape and love affairs. She talks about marriage relationships between men and women and how they're not always fine and dandy, that there are troubles in marriage and maybe how to heal that, how to avoid that. These characters are also fleeing danger. They're fleeing a flood in Italy. Boccaccio's characters were fleeing the plague out of Florence. Okay? So there's some mimicry there between the 2 titles, but still it's different because she's really engaging and including women as voices in her fiction, which is kind of cool, very cool. One of the first to ever do that. She wrote an important poem that people just fawned over. They thought it was wonderful in 1533. Her poem was Mirror, M-I-R-R-O-R, of the Sinful Soul. And she wrote a couple of dramas as well. That poem is Mirror of the Sinful Soul. So I kind of like Marguerite. I think she's kind of a strong woman and kind of speaks her mind and does what she thinks is best. And I think perhaps what she thought was best too. And so she's known basically for the Heptameron and her voice for women. A new voice, a strong voice, and kind of unusual for the time. Have a great day. I'll see you again.